Teaching is hard, and oftentimes it isn't what happens in the classroom that makes the job difficult. It's what happens before and after school, during passing periods, at lunch, in meetings, or in our lives outside of school that challenges our ability to stick with the profession. TeacherGuard is committed to focusing on making teaching sustainable and enjoyable. We want to make the rewards of the profession seem more attainable and the challenges more bearable. Our mentorship model pairs teachers with consistent daily support from a peer educator. Through TeacherGuard's four sustainability principles, we will walk the challenging times with you and allow you to enjoy the wins and celebrations that come with this beautiful profession. See TeacherGuard.net for more information and to explore how you can join our community of educators today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. All right, I want to welcome our guest for this week, Sarah DiMaria. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm great. I want to thank you so much for giving me a little bit of your time to discuss TeacherGuard, some of the sustainability principles, and just in general, a lot of what keeps good teachers in the classroom. So, as I always start off, I kind of want to give you an opportunity to describe your background, how you got into teaching, what you've done within the world of education, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, that feels like a loaded question now that I feel
In
quite
five
a
seconds or less, please.
Okay, like long story short, I've been teaching for about 12 years. I started, did my undergrad in Michigan, taught there for my first year teaching math and science, and then decided that I needed a break from the cold weather and moved to Austin, Texas, where I'm at now, at a project-based school here, and then had an opportunity a few years later to open up a project-based school, be a founding staff member. And we're now in our 10th year as a school. And I teach one section of AP Calculus currently, and I'm the instructional coach and the PD provider of our school. Um, Outside of the classroom, I do a lot of professional development, particularly in project based learning, and just recently founded a LLC around coaching teachers, particularly in math and science, and figuring out how we can best support them at getting discipline-rich math and science classrooms and experiences for students. And yeah, there's a lot of other little things mixed in there, but that's kind of the main focus at the moment.
You did an excellent job of summarizing over a decade of a career. So
Yeah, that was it. That's all of it.
that that's all you've done. So a broad range of experience, right? Obviously teaching yourself, but then starting a school up and working with what I'm assuming were both veteran and newer teachers, and then obviously now as part of your LLC, also working with coaching and getting a broad range of spectrum of teachers. And so within all of that experience over the past 12 years, thinking back to your own, thinking back to the folks that you've worked with, what would you say is one or maybe a few of the factors that you think make staying in the teaching profession a challenge for new teachers or for veteran teachers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things, particularly the demand on teachers' time and energy, and ever-changing schedules. I think um, there there's a lot of I think it's really context dependent and but I think there is just increasingly less and less support for teachers in different ways with a lot of budget cuts and things. Like, we're very fortunate that the instructional coach position even exists at our school, and that I can and that it's defined in a way that I can, like, work one-on-one with teachers. Bigger districts, I know they may go in a classroom once a week and have to go to many, many schools. I'm at a small school. So I think it's really about, what are the demands and what are the supports, for teachers? And whether you're brand new or trying to, continue and stay in the field, over many, many years, I think everyone needs to feel valued, and one way is through that support, and supporting, like, teaching is a profession where you need to continue to grow, and being able to support that growth at any level, I think is important.
I think it's hard, right? When you ask what is one or two things that keeps teachers from staying in the profession, to kind of reduce it to one or two things is challenging because there are so many nuances, so many components that go into making teaching a desirable profession, let alone sustain that desirability. And what you mentioned about feeling valued is super important. And I think for anybody who stays in the profession long term, there is something, someone uh, that provided that to them. So maybe speak to that a little bit. What was it, at least for you, that made you feel valued, or that made you feel like you continue to grow within the profession for over a decade?
Um, I think off the bat, we've got the Knowles connection. So for those who are not connected with that, we're in a was in a 5-year fellowship for the first 5 years of my teaching that focused on like supporting me as the person, me as the teacher, and through that, being able to have structured support and ongoing growth in that way was really valuable to be working with others in similar positions to where we would inspect our practice, understand what was going on and that kind of thing. And then after, without that more structured thing, I think I still had opportunities where when I like first moved to Texas, and my instructional coach at the time, I think saw something in me and like valued something I was doing in the classroom and pointed that out and opened doors and different opportunities in there and continue to have ways where those things were valued. But I think also that in the school I'm at, I've had a lot of latitude to try and experiment and know that I had like support to be able to do something new. And if it wasn't working out, to like as long as we reflected on it and grew from it, I was able to do that. So I think having some again having that validation of uh things through support and having an opportunity to have the space to grow, I think is helping. I'm not remembering if I answered that.
No,
If
you
I
did.
stayed on that or got to a
Well,
different tangent.
and I think there's so much value to feeling like you were seen by someone, right? Like there was
Mhm.
something that you did that you probably thought was great, or maybe that you didn't even think was particularly special, one or the other. But either way, somebody made it a point to point out to you, you're really great at X, Y, and Z, right? And I think you would be great for this position. Or even if there wasn't a connection to some kind of position movement, even just being told that what you're doing is good, is I think a validation that even the person who most would say I don't need validation, wouldn't bring a smile to their face. I think that for a lot of our teachers and probably for a lot of our administrators, they forget that in the same way that we do with our students, sometimes we don't highlight the ones who are doing great as often as we highlight the ones who need more of our support. I think our administrators are in the same boat, right? Sometimes the issues that they deal with channel their attention away from remembering to parade some of the great things that their amazing staff are doing. And I find it interesting that for a lot of the great teachers that I know, most of the time, if you ask them, could you teach someone to do what you are doing? Um, they will often say like, well, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Like, because they're not things that we they're characteristics more than they are things that we practice, right? Or that those
Mhm.
great teachers practice. I'm thinking of things like relationships with students, right? The idea of you're greeting them with a smile, a warm, welcome to your classroom. You can't really teach that in a way that then doesn't seem fabricated for somebody else, and somebody who naturally does that wouldn't think it's anything special because that's just their own personality.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know if that resonates, the idea that the natural aptitudes of some folks sometimes maybe don't get highlighted because, one, they're not causing problems, and two, it's really hard to teach that.
Yeah, it's making me think of like when I started teaching down here. The there's a couple teachers I looked up to, and now I'm in a position where I'm coaching them. They have more expertise, longer, journeys than I have, and are just fabulous, fabulous teachers. And there have been times where I've been coaching them, and I've wondered what the like anxiety or I'm like, they just don't see value in this. Do they like, or I'm not giving good feedback. I'm not coaching in the right way. And then it wasn't until I kind of inspected and it was like, they want they want validation out of this. These teachers do not understand how good they are. And after I like began to make sure that that was part of our like process that happened every time I coached them, it wasn't until like that like wall came down because like you said, they're not making a problem for anybody. Nothing's difficult. And so nobody has said like no one has taken a minute to remind them like, oh, that's a really good thing. And actually not everybody does that. I think it's another thing too, is like if your school, it's really rare for a school to have a practice of like going to observe other teachers. So you're very much in your own like silo in your room. And it's sometimes people come in and most times they don't. And so I think that's where we forget like, oh, like this isn't a unique good practice that I do. And you just have the assumption, well, like, I don't know, it's a good thing. I'm sure everybody does this. And when they don't, it takes someone coming in and like giving you the extra validation and highlighting it. Um, or even like if I see something, I'll have teachers like, I'm like, will you lead that in PD? And they're like, I don't know why would I do that? That seems weird. Because that's a
Hmm.
really excellent thing to do. Um, uh,
Yeah, and I'm sure this varies from state to state, but at least, all of my work has been in California. And when I think about teachers who maybe don't get that validation, but then stick with the career, I think the way that the system is set up allows them for right when when they have enough years invested to the point where I have tenure in my position. They probably cannot get rid of me. Um, I may not be getting the validation that I want. I may no longer be trying to push new initiatives because I've been shot down so many times or ignored. But I also pretty much can't lose my job. So part of teacher sustainability, I think, is not just staying in the profession, but staying in a profession in a way where you are actively trying to get better for the kids every single day. And again, in the places where you've taught, I don't know if the system is conducive to that. If folks, after they spend a certain number of years, um, essentially becoming jaded, maybe continue in the profession, probably to a detriment of the students, um, because career-wise, financially, at that point, it's a good move. And I wonder, like, if that validation was there for those teachers from the beginning, if maybe that spirit that you see with a lot of new people or a lot of people that enter the profession because you have a genuine desire, to
mhm.
change the world, and support the next generation. All those things that I feel like maybe are innocent, you can call them childish dreams, but I think the really great teachers that have been around for a while still have a sense of that, of I'm making a difference and I may have been recognized in the past for doing so, and I'm going to continue to do so because of. That was a long-winded statement with no question there for you, but I think the point that I was trying to make was just I wanted to echo a lot of what you were saying, and also talk a little bit about how maybe the current system that we have in terms of how our teachers are compensated, both financially, but also in terms of job security, um, contributes to or harms teacher sustainability. So, keeping all that in mind, a lot of what you mentioned touches indirectly on a few of the principles that I wanted to discuss with you today. So, and I want to be transparent. I haven't really talked a lot about TeacherGuard with you. And the intent behind all of these podcasts is that I want folks to kind of bring in a non-prepared perspective on what this program offers, and how it's kind of run. So, uh, I call it mentorship, peer-to-peer mentorship, because the folks that work with these teachers are practitioners. But Essentially, what TeacherGuard believes is that there are four main principles that if you are able to guide your conversations and your dialogues with your mentor around these, the likelihood of remaining, not just remaining in the profession, but remaining in it in a happy, sustainable, peaceful way, increases. And so I'm actually not going to go in order because you made me think of one in particular that just kept jumping out at me, and it's principle number three. So the idea of innovation timing. And so when we're thinking about innovation timing, the little blurb that's on the principles flyer is this idea that enthusiasm is our best friend and it can be our greatest enemy. This principle highlights the importance of controlling emotion when novel ideas surface to ensure sustainable implementation. And when I think of some of the conversations that we have with a few of the teachers that go through this program, the first thing that comes to mind sometimes is, well, my administration doesn't care about changing this, or, my department chair didn't think this was a great idea. And I think back to my career, I feel like I don't know, it's just egotistical personality. But anytime I thought I had a great idea, I was like, this is it. Like I've solved education. And I think it is really important, that people just go along with it. And when they didn't right away, I was like, well, it's their problem, right? They don't see it or they're not ready for this. That kind of over time, you get enough of that, and it may turn you away from wanting to come up with new ideas. So going back to what you were talking about, being seen,
Mhm.
a lot of the times people have great ideas, but the timing of when you present them, of when you speak to them, of who you are speaking to, and their readiness and willingness to listen to you, uh, is not there. And that doesn't mean that you should give up on the idea, but a lot of people do. And I don't know if you've seen that. In your colleagues, maybe in folks that you've coached, or maybe even in your own career.
Yeah, I think as you see, like the typical narrative of like a veteran teacher knows what they're gonna do. They're not like, yeah, they're not taking those the new input. They might just be feeling like visually looking like you're like rinse and repeating, and like not taking in that new information. But there's probably a reason for that. And I think like new teachers, I've been this. I blamed Knowles a lot of the times when I brought up a new idea and said, this program is making me ask this question." Um, but I think a lot of like if you do a traditional route to your teaching degree, then like you're coming out of school and you've got this like, you think you've got all these like cutting edge ideas about things, and you're coming into an environment where you don't know the whole system. You think you do. Everyone thinks they know about teaching because we've all been through K-12 education. And so everybody has an opinion or a view or some sort of like narrative that they're bringing into the space. But are you willing to listen? I think that's where I think about of like when you're trying to bring new ideas in and you're like, oh, why don't they listen to me? Well, have you taken the time to listen to them? And then have you taken time to listen to how and assess like how your team or your mentor teacher or your principal like takes in new ideas? Like, is it something that's really comfortable off the cuff to just like say, I've got this new initiative, I want to try it? Are they someone who needs to be prompted about something that you want to try and say, like, next week at our department meeting, would it be okay for me to share like a new idea? Or things like that. And I think it's just kind of like where understanding the environment and being willing to listen before you just jump in with something. Like a lot of the system is broken, but a lot of the systems for teachers who are in there for a long time are working within the system in some way. And some way that has been successful, hopefully for students, but for them in sustainability in being in there in that space. So thinking about where is the opening, and if it's something like, oh my goodness, this is a glaring thing that must change, Again, being willing to say, well, where do I start with this? I'm not coming in to overhaul the entire system. For you personally, that's not sustainable, right? And not going to happen in 1 year. But like, what's a small win you can have? Like, you know, if you want to have an agenda in your department meetings because they take forever and you never get anything done and you really just talk about the weird thing that happened at lunch, but you actually want to talk about your kids' test scores or something. You know what I mean? So like a small win would be like, can we have agendas during our meetings? Instead of saying like, can I take over this entire department because I know how to run a meeting?
Hmm.
Um, and so I think it's just finding the entry points. Um, and when you're thinking about like that enthusiasm, it was like the enthusiasm, like the excitement will come, the wins will come, but they may not be the first week of school.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to in any context that I've been in professionally, I've always been told you're really quiet or you only speak up, when you're asked to. Um, and I think the main reason for that is because and Knowles is part of it. I think within your cohort, everybody has a voice and everybody's new to teaching and everybody wants to speak up. I remember just those first few meetings. And it feels to me like if I am getting an unsolicited word in, it's not going to be heard with the same value that a word would be heard if I was asked to share a thought, right? Uh, and I think part of what this third principle preaches is this idea of creating the circumstances, like you said, for your idea to fall on fertile ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of how many people tell me when I'm listening to them and I may be looking down at my phone and I'm like, no, yeah, I'm listening. And I'm really not, right? Like I'm half listening because I'm not good enough to be able to multitask effectively that way, to even just look at something silly on my phone and be listening at the same time. It's that same kind of disposition that needs to happen in our schools for teachers to be able to know when can I pitch this and am I coming at this from just the approach of bringing up a problem without a solution already in mind, because at that point you're just complaining, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
your point about the department agendas, a lot of the times people may walk away from department meetings and think like, well, our department sucks, right? Like we don't have agendas, there's no structure to the conversation. And it is so much different if you were to propose, can we have an agenda? And here's a template that we have if you guys would like to use it. If not, happy to do something else. But all that takes effort. And I think for new teachers with a lot of enthusiasm, and even for veteran teachers, that's just one more thing that you now have to do. Not only did you come up with your good idea, but you got to think about every single component about how to best present it. Um, and people may believe that that's effort wasted or time wasted if the end result isn't what you wanted every time. But then it also kind of ties to principle two, this idea of taking healthy risks. And when you kind of outline your career, you mentioned, there were opportunities where you were seen because you did something perhaps extraordinary well, but that may not have naturally happened. I'm sure that there were some risks that you had to take, right? And when we talk about this principle, we don't I hate the idea of like you gotta fail forward. I think that's the expression, right? Or you gotta
Mm-hmm.
fail
Mm-hmm.
all the time, and I get the spirit from where that's coming from, but I think repeated failures for teachers who are new to the profession can oftentimes push them away. I think you gotta have some wins in there at some point, and
Well,
that's where the
and you might actually be in a system where doing that is not helpful, and like just being able to like having that failure is just not an option in the school you're in. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and there may be serious consequences to that, right? Like you may fail so hard that you as a first year teacher are getting a pink slip at the end of the year. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you won't be told that directly that it was because of that, but maybe it was, right? And so when thinking about risks, I like that the way that we phrase this principle is taking healthy risks. Like risks don't have to be reckless, right? You have to be able to measure what is it that I'm risking and am I willing to lose that? I think about gambling all the time. Like I used to love gambling. And I then realized I hated losing more than I liked winning. And then I stopped. Right. And I think that
Mhm.
that's the spirit behind this idea of like you can take risks, but you can do it in a measured way where the positive outcome is so much greater than what you would have to lose if things don't go our way. And I think that for new teachers, that can be challenging. Can you think back to some risks that you took where maybe you felt like I'm taking a leap here, but there's a pretty strong cushion if I miss and fall where it won't be the end of my career?
I think sometimes that and I'm thinking trying to think early on, um, that like if I took a risk, I thought about like what would happen if I don't take it, and like if I don't go tell my principal, I one a year teaching, I had a co-teacher who was a very challenging person to work with. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just we have very different backgrounds. This is like on me. I'm the new one in this situation. They've been here for a long time. Um, but then for me, like when I chose to like speak up about it, it ended up being because like I was like, okay, ultimately this is hurting students. And the students are not learning because XYZ, and he's not allowing me to be a collaborator in this space. So I ended up like taking a risk and talking to my principal about it, and like just kind of seeing what's going on. And I think ultimately, and that was like a long process, but I think ultimately by doing that and taking that risk, my principal saw me as like a young professional versus this like second year teacher who's brand new to our school, just like jumping around like some of the other like younger teachers were at the time. Um and that I think like ultimately, yeah, I think it caused that risk. One, helped students because eventually that teacher was no longer there.
Sure.
And two, I think, yeah, just kind of helped put me on the map in our space. Um, and it also like having like small wins like that, I think also gave me confidence to enter things in different areas. There was another time where, um, and this is like where I think I'm very thankful to have had Knowles in the first 5 years of my teaching practice, and then, sh at the end of that, or shortly after, I believe, I was working on my master's. So again, like, many times I used, like, the safety of having of risk-taking, what was like, because this organization asked me to try this in my school, or things like that, and so I can remember for one of my grad school classes, we had to create an outline for professional development for the year. And then we got like extra credit if we showed it to an administrator. And so I was like, I have this thing. I was so scared. And I was like, you don't have to use it. It's like, I'm sure it's not. It's probably not good. Here's this paper. I just need you to look at it. But they liked it, and 2 years later, I was, on the professional development team, and then a couple years after that, I'm now leading the professional development. And so taking the risk, and again, I think it still goes back to what we're talking about of, like, listening, of, like, when are you taking the risk and how? You know, if you have decided that the risk is more beneficial to take, there's still the idea of, like, how to take it. And again, does that mean you like standing up in the middle of a staff meeting and like, proclaiming your, teaching philosophy to everybody? Or is that a quiet conversation with your principal to start pushing on a lever in the system in that way? And then if that goes well, adding on to it, or if it doesn't go well, finding a different voice or different ear to hear your voice. Um, but I think like establishing, like, what the risk you wanna take is one thing, and, like, being certain about it, but then, like, again, finding the way to take it to have some success. Do I take the full risk? Do I take part of the risk? Um, what will that outcome be because of that?
Yeah, and there can be some humility, right? That's associated with some of these things, like the way that you presented your idea. right? That
Mhm.
probably is the best way that some great idea will land with even with your peers, especially as a new teacher. But I think too, if I had a really good lesson, then I'm like, man, there were times where I was like, man, I really wish somebody could see this because I think it's
Mhm.
gonna be great. And sometimes I didn't think that until after the class because I wasn't 100% sure how it was gonna go. But if I knew an administrator wasn't gonna see it, it wasn't an observation day or something. Um, Even inviting a colleague who you know is maybe a little boisterous or maybe has some influence. I think that uh is a subtle way of I'm not going to show this to the people that will necessarily that I want to see, my supervisors, my chairs, whatever. But I know that this will get to their ears or to their eyes because of the person who saw it. Um
And
or Go ahead.
well, and I think what you're also pointing out there is the risk you're taking is like putting you in the vulnerable position,
Yes. Right.
right? You're like, come watch this of mine. And it actually puts the person that you're involving with it in as like you're valuing their expertise. Like, I want your opinion on my classroom. I'm inviting you into my space to share your thoughts about this, and like, and that values the person you're bringing in, puts you in a more vulnerable spot, and yeah, and then still achieves the goal that you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there were times when that's also a good strategy to motivate colleagues who are struggling, right? Or who, because I may not want to share something that's great, but I may be able to share something that I already kind of know how to fix, but
Mhm.
I'm going to give it to them and say, "Hey, I'm having a really hard time with this. Can I get your perspective on it?" And
Mhm.
that part of like you not just getting the wins, but you getting wins for other people is also a sustainability practice because you
Mhm.
stay in the profession when you feel, like you said, one seen. And one way, ironically, to be seen is to see others because that
Mhm.
will be reciprocated over time. And I just don't know how much of that happens. How much of, again, because the days go by so quickly, because we're often locked inside our own classrooms, uh, without organizations like Knowles or other programs that bring communities of teachers together, it's difficult for those moments to take place, to fabricate those moments. So you're kind of reduced to like the natural lunchroom talks or in between class periods talks or after before school, which is probably a big reason why folks don't always feel seen because the opportunities are not always there.
Mhm. Yeah, I think especially when you get into like spring and the burnout becomes a little bit stronger, like your creativity or thought of like, oh, someone could come in my classroom and see this. Like, even thinking about asking that can tend to go away. And so without having a an outside support or something else or structures like already embedded into the day or in your department already, that stuff goes by the wayside just on the fact that you've got so many things going on.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen that wave? I feel like every teacher prep program shows it, that wave of the school year, how like enthusiasm it is great at the beginning, then it kind of like trickles down in October, comes back up during winter break, then crashes in the spring because everybody's tired, and then
Oh.
it comes back up towards the end of the school year.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I always wondered that coming back up, is that because people are happy about their practice again, or because they're happy that it's about to end? That school year is about to end,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
think
you're
it's
about
like
to,
the testing is over, you're breathing again, the kids are a little, you're not getting them to practice all that stuff as much, but yeah,
yeah.
so many things.
Yeah, and then summer comes and you maybe forget, right? You forget that crash in spring or that crash in the early fall that you had, and that enthusiasm resurfaces. And I do think that there are pockets of time throughout the year where whether it's administrators, whether it's coaches, they can capitalize on when that spirit is high, um, to keep it that way. Like there's no
Mhm.
reason why we need to go up and down throughout the year, right? I think that alone makes teaching unsustainable when people finally are like, well, it's been a few years of this. I don't know that I can do another 15 or 20 um, of these highs and lows. In the last couple minutes that we have here, because I really wanted to get your take on this, and so much of our conversation has touched on it, is this idea of principle number one, embracing uncertainty. Because the reason that one is number one is because I think that communication is so crucial to keeping teachers in the practice. And oftentimes, I think when people think they are communicating within the world of education, um, they aren't. I think they're talking, they're texting, they are typing, but true communication happens when everybody is okay realizing that we all just have a little piece of the puzzle and we don't know all the information, and yet our brains are going to want to draw conclusions that get rid of that uncertainty. And I think of so many teachers who have made up their minds of what their supervisor thinks of them, and they are far and away incorrect. Whether they think their supervisor hates them, their principal or whatever doesn't like their teaching, and then the principal maybe doesn't even know they're on the staff. Or the principal thinks they're fantastic, but has not done a great job of communicating that.
Mhm.
Um, can you speak to that a little? That idea of teachers, both veteran and new teachers alike, drawing conclusions based on limited information that then make permanent decisions, either good or bad based off that.
Yeah, that's big. Um, um, yeah, I think, we're parts of a big system, and the larger your school is, the bigger the system is. And it's impossible, as much as anyone tries, to communicate everything kind of clearly. So I think one way to make like to embrace this uncertainty is kind of like understanding where you fall within the system. And like what are the things like you truly know, like your students, certain expectations that you have, things like that. And then to the things that you don't know, just continuing to inspect them with like curiosity of I think you know it's really easy to make assumptions of our like what our different staff members are have. Someone comes in late, like, oh, they just don't care about this job, they're lazy if they leave when the bell rings, oh, they must hate this, they're out of here. But we don't know that, oh, they're dropping off their kids in the morning, or they're rushing to pick their kids up, and then actually they're home doing 3 hours of kid care, and then they're working at night. And it's just so easy because we have to make all these snap decisions and things throughout the day, just to stay, like, you got 30 kids in your classroom and you're making these decisions like rapid fire, and it's really hard to then slow your brain down when you when it's not required that you make those snap decisions. And so then when your principal comes in and you're in that step decision mode, and they say, you why didn't you respond to my email, and then you go, oh, they hate me. It's like you've made that snap decision, but wait, actually they need this to be able to do a report to superintendent that's due tomorrow. um right, so there's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, and like I think kind of in embracing, like, yeah, where you're at in the system and what you're okay with knowing and not knowing, um, I think does a lot for sustainability, because I think when, like, for new teachers, when you come in, you want to change, or you want to think about everything. Okay. Like, I'm thinking about my classroom, but I'm thinking about my colleagues, but I'm thinking about the system of the school and our school district and all of these things. But that's really overwhelming, and it's impossible for you to understand and know everything, even within the first 5 years. Um, but what you can know for certain is what you do in your classroom, what you do with your kids, and the work you put in every day. And then the next level out, you can think about approaching that with curiosity of, like, why did this interaction happen this way? What's another narrative that it could be? And I know I keep leaning on Knowles, but I know some of the reason I have that perspective is from the work that we did with them. And I remember when we did an activity that like caused us to like think about alternative scenarios for things. It like really shifted my perspective in how like I saw a lot of my colleagues. And in at that time, I was newly in this professional development role and I was still doing this. Oh, this teacher doesn't care. They're on the computer. They're da 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 da. Da." And when I like challenged the assumptions I was holding, and tried to look at a different perspective, I was able to actually see expertise in my colleagues in a different way and like leverage them in new ways, and it just reduced my stress. And that's not a saying like I'm always making wrong assumptions and like you should change your mind on things. Sometimes it's just not working. But if you approach things with curiosity and just be okay with the not knowing, you can make it more sustainable for you and do a better job on yourself, and then gain the knowledge over time to understand things more um, deeply.
Yeah, and I think you made me think of administrators, ultimately the people that make the biggest system-wide decisions at schools. It's easy to forget that for the most part, they were teachers. And so they are facing the same thing that teachers are currently facing in terms of being uncertain about things. There are teachers who didn't necessarily have manager training. And so now all
Mhm.
of a sudden you have those same challenges, insecurities, concerns that you had as a teacher, but now you're responsible for dozens of staff members and hundreds, thousands of students. So I think extending that grace is a product of embracing uncertainty because we don't finish the stories for other people. We kind of let time do that. And then, as best we can, we navigate through the decisions with the limited information that we have. So,
Yeah. And I don't think either one of us are, I just want to, neither one of us are saying like, if it's a real bad situation, like just sweep it under the rug and
right.
think that they could be a good person. No, like it's just saying take the moment to be curious about it. And again, then like leaning into like, do we need to take a healthy risk here and inspect the situation further? Or are we okay in this uncertainty because potentially we've interpreted it in a different way, or we can balance without knowing, um, and focus our energy on something that's more worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and be okay knowing that you're gonna make a decision and not necessarily get validation for it or the feedback of whether your decision was right or wrong right away. So, and that's okay too, to kind of know I made this decision and it my mind it's the right one for right now, and tomorrow I can flip on it. If new information is presented that makes me do that. And I think that that is tough for people because I think especially teachers, we like you said, we have a million decisions to make in a day and you want to move on to your next one. So to continue re-examining it could paralyze us. But I think to not do it at all uh makes you leave the profession over time potentially. So I want to thank you, Sarah, for all the time that you've given me here today, and for this wonderful discussion. I end most of these podcasts by asking folks who are joining me if they had one or two sentences to share with a teacher who's in their third or fourth year who's telling you that they're thinking of leaving the profession. Uh, what would that be?
Um, I think it would be to ask yourself why and give yourself the time to do that. Force the hand on taking a couple of days off. Give yourself the reflection time. And again, similarly to how we've been talking about this, um, of just thinking about like, where are you at in the system? Is it your school? Is there a different space for that? Have we tried 3 or 4 schools and it's not our space? Maybe leaving is the right decision. But perhaps it's finding, like we said, a community that will validate the work that you're doing, and there's a space for that. When I talk to teachers who are, um, considering moving schools and things like that, and there's a lot of guilt in trying to leave a school because You don't want to leave your students, you care about them. You don't want to leave your colleagues, you care about them. Um, those people are everywhere. Every school you go to, kids need you. And so finding the one that is your fit, there are so many schools out there. Like I urge you to find the time to truly reflect on why, and don't let burnout be the reason. Um, make your decision kind of if you can find some time that you can kind of ease the burnout and make the decision then before moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah, once again
Thank
for your
you.
time. Appreciate having you on today. Teaching is hard, and oftentimes it isn't what happens in the classroom that makes the job difficult. It's what happens before and after school, during passing periods, at lunch, in meetings, or in our lives outside of school that challenges our ability to stick with the profession. TeacherGuard is committed to focusing on making teaching sustainable and enjoyable. We want to make the rewards of the profession seem more attainable and the challenges more bearable. Our mentorship model pairs teachers with consistent daily support from a peer educator. Through TeacherGuard's 4 sustainability principles, we will walk the challenging times with you and allow you to enjoy the wins and celebrations that come with this beautiful profession. See TeacherGuard.net for more information and to explore how you can join our community of educators today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.